Friday morning, I had an experience that many of you have had. Friday morning, I woke up, and there was good preaching going on, and it was me preaching. And I was lying in bed, and I heard some preaching, and I woke up and thought, that's good. Oh, I like that. I've never thought of that before. You understand, I just said something that was hilariously funny, right? I said that I had an experience that you often have. You woke up when good preaching is going on, like that. That's funny. Would you wake Scott up and tell him that was funny, Anne-Marie? I woke up and I was preaching on Acts chapter 27 and Acts chapter 28, and I literally was. And I thought, well, that's good. And some of the things I was saying I had never said before or thought of before. I thought, well, that's good. Where am I going to use this? I'm already programmed for this Sunday and the Sunday afterwards and Sunday afterwards and the Sunday afterwards and the Sunday afterwards. I know where we're going. This is good. But where are we going to put this? Lord, am I speaking someplace I don't know about? Yeah, you're speaking this Sunday morning, and this is what you're speaking on. And so we're going to look for a moment of time at the life of the Apostle Paul and the narrative in his life the summary of this narrative of his life, I can say, Paul on his way to Rome as a prisoner, shipwrecked on his way, bitten by a snake, and praying for others. That's the narrative summary. So if you have your Bibles, I'm going to ask you to turn to Acts chapter 27 and 28. This is Paul the mentor. This is Paul who's been writing to young Timothy. These notes that we've been looking at for these last several months. This is the inside view of Paul. This is who Paul is when things aren't going right. Our Christianity is not proven when things are going perfect. Our Christianity is demonstrated when things aren't going right. When we get bumped and when we get hit, what pours out of us? And so we see Paul here getting bumped, getting hit, and we see what pours out of him. We're going to take you to the island of Malta in Acts chapter 28, verse 1, but we're going to set some things up that I've never saw in the narrative before in chapter 27. And then again in chapter 28. And I have preached on chapter 28 so many times. And what I'm about to say to you, I have never said before. Acts chapter 27. To set the context. Paul comes to Cornelius, his Roman centurion, his guard, his captor, who's in charge of his imprisonment, who's taking him to Rome to face Nero. Nero hated Christians. Nero would burn Christians alive in tar and pitch and eat dinner underneath their flames. It was a macabre experience that Paul had in front of him. And Paul, at the beginning of chapter 27 in Acts, goes to Cornelius centurion as they're boarding on a ship, and he says these words, I feel in my spirit that we should not do this. And he's not talking about his destination or his imprisonment. But what he's talking about is going on this ship, taking this ship to take this trip. He is not resisting going to Rome. He's not resisting seeing Nero. He knows in his spirit that he's supposed to see them. God has confirmed to him, this is your destiny. This is what I want you to do. I want you to stand before this king and tell him about me, Jesus Christ. And so Paul is not saying to Cornelius, we shouldn't go. You shouldn't take me. But he's saying to Cornelius, we should not go on this ship. God has warned me, the Spirit has told me, we should not go on this ship. In the beginning of Acts chapter 27, Cornelius the centurion listens to Paul, and then he consults the experts. He consults the seaworthy individuals. He consults the old salts, and they say it is fine, it is good for us to sail. And here's just a thought to sprinkle into your minds as we begin this walk through this bump that Apostle Paul experienced. Cornelius was challenged by a way that often you and I are challenged, and let me develop it fully. Will we seek the advice of experts, or will we listen to the voice of the Lord? Will we seek the advice of experts, or will we listen to the voice of the Lord? Let me quickly qualify this by saying this. I am so thankful for the experts in my life. They are God-given and God-breathed. And it's not one or the other, but it actually is both. I must listen to the voice of God and the Spirit of God, and then I consult the experts to tell me, how do I do what God is telling me to do? And there's a blend of that we need in our lives. But for some of you, you lean too much towards the internet experts. After all, it's a glossy page on my screen. And you don't know what it is to hear for yourself the voice of God. The church cannot run by expertise. The church must run by the Spirit of God. But the church cannot run without expertise. And so Cornelius would not listen to what Paul had to say. And off to sea they went. And when they're at sea, what do we find the prisoner Paul doing? And I'm going to say something to you that in a moment of time that I've never said before. The sea gets rough. The sea tosses, and for weeks at end, they don't know where they are. They can't accomplish anything. They can't steer. They can't direct. They're blown all by the storm. You ever been in a storm like that? Not on sea, but in life? One moment you're here, one moment you're there, then you're here and you don't know what you tried everything and nothing works. Have you been there? Are you there? Paul was on that ship, cast about for days. It says in Acts chapter 27 that Paul again comes to Cornelius and speaks to him. That doesn't sound very significant, does it? But it's huge. The man that would not listen, Paul goes back to speak again. This time not with a stinging rebuke or a harshness, but to tell him again what the Spirit of God is saying. Who is this Apostle Paul? He is a man who does not give up on people even when they don't listen to him. And he says to Cornelius, hear me when I say this, an angel of God has appeared to me aboard this ship, and he has told me that none of you will be lost. God has granted you all to me, some 275 men. God has said, Paul, because of your prayers, I will save all of them. I have marveled in the past at the power of one man in intercession prayer and 275 people being saved. The enemy wants to think that your prayers aren't significant. The enemy wants to make you think that when you prayed over Noel and Marnie, that didn't have any effect. But hell was stopped because of those prayers. There should be a lot more amens in this place than there are right now. So Paul prays. He says to Cornelius, I prayed. And God told me that all would be well, but we need to be shipwrecked on that beach yonder. Hear me when I try to walk you through this. And Reverend Middlebrook is here so he can correct all theology later. Hear me when I say this. If your prayers are not working, maybe you're praying about the wrong thing. I'm not talking against praying through. I'm not talking about battling in prayer. But I'm talking to you about a concept that we need to hear. If your prayers aren't working, maybe you are praying about the wrong thing. On that ship, tossed at sea, Paul is not praying, Lord, save the ship. Lord, save me. He is praying for those 275 men and women, perhaps, whose lives are in trauma and in danger. What he is praying about is not his physical locale and not his physical being and not his physical future and not his personal need. He is praying about these others, these other 275 people, and God heard his prayers. So if our prayers aren't working, maybe we are praying about the wrong thing. Let me elaborate on that. Do you think that God who knows our thoughts before we think them, and God who knows what we're going to speak before we speak them, and God who knows the very number of the hair on our head, and for some of you that changes constantly? Do you think that God, that omniscient God, doesn't know what we need? Do you think that? Yet how many times do we approach His grace and say, here's my life, and here's what's going on, and here's what I need, and here's the situation, and here's what you need to do. And we go, well, those prayers don't seem to be working. He knows everything that you need. Maybe you shouldn't be praying that way. Maybe you should be praying about the 275 people around you who are going to hell. Maybe when you focus your prayers on the kingdom business, maybe that's when you experience what He does in your life. It says in Matthew chapter 6, the famous verse, seek ye first the kingdom of God and all these things. He knows what you have need, clothing and food and protection. He knows you need all that. So don't pray about that. Pray about His kingdom. Yet we find ourselves in this self-centered society that we live in. We're constantly looking inward, and we spend the girth of our prayers or the dearth of our prayers praying about me, 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 and me. It's not wrong to pray about me, but pray about the other 275, and then you'll see the difference that happens in me. If the enemy can't stop us from praying, he'll get us to only pray about ourselves. Now, some people have a difficulty with this because some people have been raised that you shouldn't pray about yourself, and so they're going, aha, I knew I was wrong. Just be balanced by this. If your prayers aren't working, if your wife is not changing, if your wife is not changing, pray about something else. I felt like God spoke directly to me in that service. You hear what I'm saying? If the enemy can't stop us from praying, he'll get us to recite our lists to God over and over and over again. I have lists with God. I do. I have lists of all the prayer needs. Here they are. Now let's talk about your kingdom, and let's pray in earnest. If your prayers aren't working, change your prayers. I'll say it again, although it be a cliche. What happened when Job prayed for his 3 idiot friends? Job was healed. When he took the focus off himself, that's when he experienced the grace of God. And so we see this Paul being bumped by a major disaster, and his prayer is not on himself, but his prayer is on others. And God says to him, I have heard your prayers. And Paul and 275 others in Acts chapter 28 find themselves on the island of Malta. And Acts chapter 28 verse 1 says, the first thing that is noted, well, it says, we found ourselves on Malta. The narrative is plural now. Paul's not by himself. He has companions, and we think it's Luke who wrote the book of Acts and the book of Gospel of Luke. It says, we have arrived on Malta. I am so glad for the we's in my life. We don't know who this we really was, but Paul was not alone. You know, when we are part of a group walking through this life, that is when there is strength. There are people in this church I would go to war with because they have my back and they have my heart and I have theirs. And we're supposed to walk amongst a we and not just a me. Recently, and this church has been praying for one of my very bestest friends, Frank Chamberlain. He's part of the we that I walk in on a regular basis. And he and his 3 brothers, as I said before, were diagnosed with prostate cancer all at the same time. We went away for a week together, the 4 of us, because Frank was about to get his report. And so the we of us went together. And the we of us were together when he got his report. And praise be to God, praise be to God. The doctor said to him, you couldn't get a better report than this. I'll see you again in a year. Don't worry. So thank the Lord. Frank is part of my we. I am part of Frank's we. I'm desperately trying not to say we. But as the narrative opens up, Paul is with friends in battle. You know what happens so often? We're in battle with friends, against them, but not with them. It's a counterfeit. If you don't have people fighting with you, you'll be fighting against others. Enlarge your circle. It takes a village to raise a church. So we have come to the island of Malta. And the first thing that Paul notes, or Luke notes, is this. The natives, the barbarians, showed them extraordinary kindness. And Luke can't get over it. These good-for-nothing, back hills, barbarians showed us all extraordinary kindness. And Luke writes it down, and he is struck by it. And he writes it down so that we see it, and likewise should be struck by it. Look at me up here, and with every good eye that you have. The power of the church is found in the extraordinary kindness of the individuals who attend it. Did you hear me? The power of the church. I am so glad we have an amazing pastoral team. Carol comes at this time to give an announcement. Oh, you already did that, right? I am so glad that we have amazing leaders in this church. But the power of the church is in the extraordinary kindness of the individuals who walk through that physical building's doors. The world cannot comprehend extraordinary kindness. Because the world is driven by get even or get ahead. And I'll say this to you. 39 years of preaching? Wow. That's a long time for not working. 39 years of preaching, most of the stuff that comes through my door are people struggling with being driven to get even or to get ahead. That's the way of the world. The way of the Christian is extraordinary kindness. That extraordinary kindness is based on how we approach people. It's based on our attitude, and it's based on our actions. But it begins with our face. And our face pours out what's in our heart. And if our heart is not in the face place of God, our face is going to send messages that have nothing to do with extraordinary kindness. You know, people come to church, this church, because of people who are walking extraordinary kindness. And sometimes people leave this church because some faces are snarling. That's just my natural face. See a surgeon. Change it. Extraordinary kindness stood out in Luke's mind. And extraordinary kindness should be what draws people to us and to Christ. That's who we are supposed to be. Simple acts of kindness. That guy did this to me, and by all, I'm going to get even if it kills me. It is killing you and others. Back in 1977, my goodness, I wasn't even born then. I'm just seeing if you're still with me or not. Pastor Middlebrook was 35 at the time back then. Extraordinary kindness, church. That's what makes a difference. And I have an idea who some of you are who walk in that constantly, because my office is full of people who've been touched by you and come here to see who this Jesus really is. That's the power of the church. Extraordinary kindness. These natives, they don't kill the Romans. They don't take advantage of the situation to try to get ahead. You know, my stomach almost feels physically sick at times when I see Christians who are caught up with getting ahead, getting even, making it for me. There is nothing wrong with stuff. But there's everything wrong with stuff when that's what drives you. May God expand in this church extraordinary kindness. May God breathe that in us. May people outside say, we're not sure about that preacher or that other guy or that other guy or that other girl. We're not sure about them. And the board, we're not quite sure. But man, their people are kind. The church would be full because people are looking for kindness. What do we find Paul doing after Luke notes this extraordinary kindness? And I have preached this passage for years. Verse 2 of Acts chapter 28. And the natives, literally the barbarians, showed us extraordinary kindness. Because of the rain that had set in, and because of the cold, they kindled a fire and received us all. But when Paul gathered a bundle of sticks, as the fire is going, Paul is out gathering sticks. And this is how I preached this for years. You see what Paul's doing? He's being a servant. See that? He has come from the sea, and now he's out there getting sticks. He's not writing treatises or praying or worshiping. He's out gathering sticks. And I have said, hopefully rightly, what we need is more stick gatherers rather than stick throwers. But Friday morning when I woke up, I heard this real good preaching going on. And this passage is being preached on, but in this, and I'm not making that up, in this way. Why was Paul picking up sticks? I heard myself say. And then I heard myself answer. Or maybe it was the Spirit of God. Paul was picking up sticks because he was still a prisoner and nothing had changed. He was still a prisoner and nothing had changed. Wait a minute. On the ship, he stood up for God, not once, but twice. On the ship, he intervened for others that were trying to hurt him and kill him and ignite him in front of Nero. He intervened for them. He pled for them. He encouraged them. He showed them compassion. He was a glowing light for Jesus Christ on that ship. And then what changes for him? Nothing. He is still a prisoner. He is still being abused, and nothing has changed. You know what I hear people say to me over and over again throughout the years? You know, I did it Christ's way, and it didn't work, so I'm done. I did it Christ's way. I did everything I was supposed to do. I did everything right. I did it month after month and year after year, and I am done. It doesn't work. Nothing changed. Paul did it Christ's way, and nothing changed. In fact, it got worse. And modern Christianity is not prepared for this concept. If I do not receive my immediate reward, I won't do what is righteous. I will get ahead myself or get even myself. Church, we don't do what is right because of the reward. We do what is right because of Jesus Christ. Paul did what was right. He was still being an abused prisoner, gathering sticks to warm the enemy. And as he gathered those sticks, it says that a viper, a serpent, came out and bit him on the hand. May I say to you this, and I'm going to go preacher-ish for 2 times here, and I don't do this very often, but I'm going to sound like a preacher. Push the narrative a little bit farther than it textually allows. Not making stuff up. Going to leap from it. When we say, I'm not doing this anymore because it hasn't worked, in fact, it's got worse, we've just been struck by the serpent, but we didn't see it. Paul saw his serpent. And there are some of you who are being poisoned right now by an unseen serpent because you said, I've done everything I'm supposed to do, and it just doesn't work. What would Jesus Christ say to you? keep on doing what is right to do. The serpent hit Paul. Back then, just as a word of insight, the vipers on Malta back then, you had 7 seconds to live after a viper bit you. 7 seconds. What were Paul's final words going to be? It says in our narrative that he just shook it off into the fire and kept on going. Now here goes the largest preacherism that you will ever have heard me say in 6 years. I'm going to leap from this shaking of the serpent into the fire and give you a preacherism. Some of you cannot shake the serpent of old from your lives because you do not have the fire of the Spirit in your life. Paul shook that serpent, literal serpent, over a literal fire, and it fell off. We get shook by the serpent that strikes us now because we don't know what it is to truly walk in the fire of the Spirit. And we would rather have experts tell us what to do or be our own expert than to listen to the voice of God who says you need the fullness and the baptism and the infilling and the power and the gifts and the fruit of the Spirit in your life. And we go, heard it, got it, read the book, doesn't work, I'm not there. Are you here? Am I all alone by myself? Some of you, the serpent is running amok because there's no fire or Spirit in your life. You got a lot of expertise. You got a lot of insights. And you gather a lot of documentation, but without that fire of the Spirit, the serpent doesn't curl up, he just smiles and bites even more. I'm going to conclude in just a moment of time. Some of you might be thinking, I don't know what he was eating Thursday night, but I hope he doesn't eat that again. Paul shook that serpent into the fire, carries on doing what he's going to do or what he was doing. I want to see that on the big screen in heaven. By then it'll be an 80K. I want to see that. What was he like? Oh, I have to stay on topic. I have to stay on topic. I don't think I would be that calm. I might say, oh, bless God. I don't know what I would say. This morning we have on a shelf in our bedroom a little spider brooch that we got from Bev Langford. Little spider brooch. I saw that spider this morning and I was almost through the roof. It scared the daylights out of me and Dana was nowhere to save me. I fight bears and dinosaurs, and she kills everything else. Paul just shook it off into the fire. Just shook it off. Because he didn't need to know what was going to happen. He knew who he was. And we spend so much time on what's happening and what's going to happen, we forget that our focus has to be on who we are. I am the son of the King of Kings and the Lord of Lords. I am the brother of the Savior of the world. I dwell at his table and walk with him on a regular basis. I don't care what's going to happen to me because I know who I am. We have to be who we are, and that's our focus. If I'm going to die by this serpent, I'm going to die by being who I am. That was good stuff. And so Paul shakes it off into the fire. And let me close with this. When the snake bit Paul, those natives, those barbarians who showed extraordinary kindness, they showed a reaction that has killed churches for centuries. They showed a reaction that has killed churches for centuries. They said, look at that guy. He has escaped the sea, but he could not escape justice. He is going to blow up and die. They judged him instantly by what their eyes saw. We know what his problem is. and he can't escape it. He is getting his just reward. I am so thankful that in this church it is minimalized people who judge and condemn others. But let's just be clear. Where we are going as a church, there is no room for such garbage. We are not here to judge. We are not here to condemn. We are not here to execute. We are here to walk alongside. We are here to say, yes, you've fallen, but I'm still here. And we will walk with you. None of you have the gift of judgment. None of you have the gift of execution. You need to have the gift of extraordinary kindness. That's what we need to walk in. But those natives said, this guy is going to die, and we're going to enjoy watching him bloat up. The church is not a place to shoot or add to its wounded. The church is a place to see people set free. The natives were astonished when Paul didn't blow up and die. Well, he must be something special. When his book comes out online, I'm going to order it to change my life. See, the natives walk by their eyes and walk by what they know and walk by what they see. And God tells us to walk by the Spirit. And so again, we're confronted with this choice. What are we going to trust? My eyes? My gut instinct? My feeling on the matter? Let me tell you something. Sometimes those things are right, but many more times they are wrong. If you are not being led by the Spirit, you're being led down the wrong road. And you cannot be led by the Spirit if you're walking that road by yourself. You have to be part of a we. I should say much more because the preaching even got better on Friday morning, but let's close our eyes and bow our heads, please.